Getting started. Suresh, thank you so much for joining today. Happy Father's Day. Like I told you earlier, here in Canada, it's Father's Day, and you told me that you're a father, so that's a beautiful thing. I want to introduce Suresh Kumar Jetti. Really excited to talk to him today. Before I give an introduction, because I don't think I'll do it much justice, I'd like to hand it over to you, Suresh, and maybe you can tell us and tell me a little about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Lurio, for this kind invitation and for this kind of introduction. As you mentioned, I am Suresh Jetti. I started my science career at IIT Madras, which is a Indian Institute of Science and Technology in India. From there, I moved to Belgium to do my PhD in neural networks, in biological neural networks, and from there, I went to do like a postdoc at MIT, looking at synaptic connections or synapses, which are like tiny junctions through which neurons communicate. So throughout my career, I focus on understanding biological neural networks, and in the process of doing so, I got interested into artificial neural networks, which is a favorite topic of mine these days.
Wow. I want to start from the very beginning. Obviously, you are part of an amazing journey, and we'll get to that in due time. But I'd like to hear a little bit about like what were some of your interests in your early academic career? Maybe we can go back to high school or the equivalent of high school that you would have in India. Maybe let's say around the age of 14 to 16. What were some of your passions? Were you like a kid into video games and computer electronics, or is your current career completely unrelated to what you were into as a teenager?
In my, I like the biology from my high school days. So I used to observe all the plants and animals. And by the way, in my high school, we have like a taxonomy lessons, which is about the classification of animals and plants. It was one of my interests, and also like plant physiology and animal physiology are also my passions. So these passions brought me to study like neuroscience, like neurophysiology, based on my interest in like in understanding systems using physiology as a tool. So I had this passion for biology and physiology from a very young age.
Nice, nice. Is there a moment you can point to where you were like, this is what I'm going to do? Or was it a question of you had really amazing grades and great performance? And maybe like, is this the old story of your parents wanting to be a doctor? Like all of our parents want us to be doctors? Or is there another story to your journey into biology?
I used to love research from my high school, and from high school I went to like my undergrad, where I have a very supporting faculty. So I asked one of my faculty. He's a and physiologist, and he teaches physiology. At the time, I like both plant physiology and animal physiology, so I wasn't sure to which direction I should go. Then I asked my professor at my faculty. He told that maybe you can join like a course where it has like both components, and based on that you can choose what you love. So with this advice, I went on. I took like national entrances. In India, national entrances is a big thing, so it's very highly competitive. So I got into a very competitive school for my masters, where I focused mostly on animal behavior and neurophysiology and biochemistry in my second year of my masters. From there, I went to do like a project at IIT Madras, which is a very famous school in India, where I learned recording from single neurons and cells, and that's how I become like very fascinated about neuroscience.
If you can help me out a little bit with the timeline. Again, I don't want to show your age here, but what years are we talking about when this decision came about to go into the field?
It was in early 2004, 5, those years.
Okay.
So where I was trying to figure out is plant physiology is a good thing or animal physiology a good thing for me, and then I figured out that I enjoy more animal physiology because it's more complex, like how brain function.
Yeah.
Is more complex than I don't mean to say plants are simple. Plants are also like complex. They have their own immune system and all this complexity. But compared to plants, I thought at the time that focusing on brain and neuroscience is the next frontier of medicine and biology, and that's why I moved to like neuroscience as my career.
So I want to talk a bit about money because I think money is really important, especially at an age where you're making a decision about your career path, right, and which path to follow. If we're looking at 2004, 2005, was your decision, and by the way, I also want to say, as you were talking about your decision to go into, animal biology research, I get the feeling that like that was your passion. Like no matter what happened, that's what you're gonna go into.
Right.
Whatever. Even if you didn't, if you failed, you'll probably figure out a way to get there. But I'm also thinking money is really important, right? Like when we're making, our parents always tell us, don't get into art, don't get into history, don't get into philosophy, because those are really difficult places to sort of make money, right? To support yourself. And our parents always look to us, for us to have an easy life, and money makes things easy. What does in 2004, 2005, what does the field of biological research with an animal focus look like? Was there any money into that? Like, what job would you possibly?
That's a great question. I like this question because, as you mentioned, some of my friends and my friends' parents, they were like asking me, why are you going into biology? Because in India, people used to think at the time that computer sciences, software engineering, and math are fancy, and biology is just like understanding plants and animals, and doing dissections and working on frogs or like some kind of like weird animals. But I thought it's fine, even if I don't become like rich. My passion lies in like biology, understanding like life systems. In my class, in my high school, we are in my school, we are like almost like 90 people, like in 3 different classes. Among these 90 people, I'm the only person who choose biology.
Wow.
So most people went to pursue like math and engineering, 70%, and a few people went on commerce, and
Okay.
and few people went on like history and law. I'm the only
Wow.
person who choose biology, and I can say I'm successful because I went to MIT, and then I'm working as a scientist at a major hospital, and I'm enjoying what. Well, I'm not paid like in millions and billions, but
Yeah.
I enjoy what I'm doing.
Wow. Tell me about the pressure of like your friends and your family and your mentors. Did they support it? Was that something where like, yeah, Suresh is going to do this because Suresh is like, are you a stubborn individual where like when you want to do something, you're going to do it regardless, no matter what anyone says? Or was this a situation where you kind of took a risk? You're like, hey, look, I'm a young man. If I'm going to take any risks, I'm going to take them now because later when I have kids and I have a career, I can't really make dangerous moves. Can you tell me a bit about the mindset and the place where Suresh found himself at that time?
Yeah, usually from my maybe it's my intrinsic nature. I like working on risky projects and also like risky endeavors.
Okay.
So I'll tell you as well. Move on. My postdoc project, which I did, was very risky, and nobody have done a technique that I did. So I got this inspiration from a grad school, from a grad school advisor also. Doing risky things and high risk and high reward things is my kind of thing. So it's been in my psychology or my personality that take like doing risky things and not following crowds. Maybe, yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it because it's going to be a full circle to this. Interesting that, everyone's like, you should get into computer science, get into all of this. And you said, that's not my passion. But yet, but I don't want to ruin the surprise. We'll come to that. I want to continue a little bit with your journey. So I'm assuming you went to, you finished your undergrad. Do you go after the undergrad straight to Belgium, or do you have a bit of a career somewhere else before then?
Yeah, I worked in a lab in IIT Madras in Chennai.
Okay.
At that time, the PI, a professor, he just moved from US to India.
Okay.
And he's establishing his lab. It's a very unique thing that what he's doing. So it's like, as you might know, all cells have tiny pores called ion channels, which conducts like ions, or in other words, like currents.
Right.
So these are the channels that make us to live, like our heartbeat, our brain function, and even our muscle contraction. So at that time, there's only like one lab in India doing this stuff, and there's a second lab. So because again, in my undergrad and my master's, as I mentioned, I felt fascinated with like animal physiology. One lesson I really enjoyed was like nerve conduction, like how do neurons communicate with spikes. So those depolarization and hyperpolarization kind of biology was very attracted me. So that's why I went to a lab that do this kind of like tiny neuron physiology. And from there, with this, I published like a couple of papers in 3 years, like in short journals. And with that experience, I went to Belgium to do my PhD.
Beautiful. How did the Belgium, if you don't mind me asking, how did the Belgium connection come? Did someone reach out to you because they liked your work and they said, "Hey, we'd like to have you"? Was it a university? Or was that a completely unrelated, maybe like an immigration kind of situation? How did the Belgium story come about?
At the time, again, I was residing between US and Europe.
Okay.
So compared to US, in Europe, PhD is like faster. Like maybe you can get like in 4 years to 5 years, or sometimes also like less than 4 years. Whereas in US, it is like longer. At the time, and also in US, applying to schools is like a 1 year process.
Mm-hmm.
I also took my exams for GRE and I got a good score.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm applying to Europe, like especially in Germany, Netherlands, and Belgium, and also like in France. And I got into this lab in Belgium at the time, working on neural circuits, because his PI is like very young and he's using very cool techniques to study brain.
Right.
So like the whole brain, looking at the deep brain regions with the fancy microscopes and doing electrophysiology, the technique I learned in IT Madras. So I thought, because it's a new topic, working on neural networks back in 2011, I thought I should enter into this field of neural networks and study how brain function. So that's why I decided to go to PhD to Belgium.
At the time, were you single? Were you married when you moved to Belgium? How did that work?
I was married, so okay. I was married before my PhD. So because of immigration issues, my wife was back in India for 1 year, okay. And then she joined after 1 year.
Okay, so 1 year isn't bad. 1 year isn't bad.
Yeah.
I'm asking because I like to know from a perspective of someone who's in academia, right, and trying to do his PhD in a brand new country, right, different culture, different expectations. But obviously, the education is the same, right? What you learn, and the challenge of what you learn is the same. And I want to ask a little bit about that 1 year. Was that obviously it's a challenge, but tell me a little bit about what was the most challenging thing for that 1 year moving to a new continent, let's say, and having to still, because you remember, like the PhD still requires you to be 100%, and I'm sure as you know, studying at the level of a PhD requires a lot of brain power, and that brain power, and I'm saying this for the audience because obviously you know this, but that brain power has a direct, not correlation, but direct relationship with your stress levels, your health levels, right, and your well-being if you're alone in a new country, in a new continent, without your significant other. Tell me a little bit about how you kept up. Did you fail any of that? Were there any impacts or negative impacts that you faced? Suresh, can you hear me? Oh, I think we lost Suresh. We had some technical difficulties. Suresh, thank you so much for joining back. We should be good now. I'm gonna pick up where we left off at the end. So we were talking about your journey into your PhD. And remind me again, what was the PhD you applied for in Belgium?
It's a KU Leuven. It's called Catholic University of Leuven. Nice. They say it's the Harvard of Belgium.
Nice. Okay, I didn't know that. I'm gonna do some research afterwards because I love academia and education lore. So my question was, you move from India to Belgium, and you were 1 year without your significant other. Now, it's a huge stress and impact. My parents were immigrants who moved from Albania to Canada around the early 40s. I think you were a little bit younger than that, but I know it's a lot of challenges, right? There's stress, there's mental well-being, the loss of your circle and your network and everything of the surrounding, and as well, you have your significant other not there with you. So I want to know about your first year, right? The amount of pressure and requirement that learning and PhD requires. Was that a difficult year? It was a difficult year. I want to know a little bit about how you dealt with that, and what did you learn from that? Maybe from being a biological expert, especially in understanding neuroscience.
Yeah, I'll first come to some challenges I had. As obviously, I'm from south of India, from a state called Andhra Pradesh, which is very tropical. From a tropical country, I moved to Belgium, which is not really like
not a tropical country.
Luckily, I moved in May, so it's still like in summer, but so it helped me to adjust. So in first month, I just took my time to adjust, and then from second month onwards, I worked in lab. So because I have, as I mentioned, our PI, the professor who was doing PhD, he was like very young. He just had his lab. Yeah. He used to work along with us. Nice. So, for example, if you're learning any new technique, he's always there to help me. Right. So because he's always there to help me, it helped me to learn like quickly. I think within 1 year, I become like an expert in two difficult techniques. One is like doing like recordings from in vivo from small animal zebrafish, and then doing like using a fancy microscope to look at neural activity. It's like MRI for small animals. So in 1 year, I learned these techniques,
Wow.
and then my wife joined after. It was not exactly 1 year, like 10 months. She joined, and then we were happy, and we also had our first kids in my last year's of PhD.
Amazing. I love it. I want to ask something, and I want to hear your answer as an expert. And I don't think this is part of your expertise, but I'd like to understand: has there been any studies, or what is the understanding that we have? Obviously, according to the science, for the impact on the neurological system from living like you said in a tropical climate where the sun hits at a certain angle with a certain time, and maybe even the position of the planet, if there are any impacts compared to taking that human being who was raised and grew up for let's say 20 years or 30 years in that one area of the world with that particular climate and sun exposure, and you take them to almost a complete opposite, but I won't say opposite, but very different, severely or significantly different climate and position and seasons. I'm sure there are, but what is the current understanding of science? And since you went through it yourself and you were the control and the experiment, what are the impacts that the science currently understands for those neurological impacts?
Yeah, one very established thing is like cooling. If you take an animal and you let it stay at room temperature versus less room temperature, like 20 degrees, because of cooling effect, the neural activity will decrease. That means if you do like an MRI, maybe you see like less hot colors. That means your neural activity for some reason will go down. It's because of opening of channels and closing of channels and at temperature. Okay. And that's one thing. So your neural activity waves and patterns are different. And that's one thing with temperature. Also, because of change from a place that is very tropical to a place that is very non-tropical at a different latitude and longitude on Earth, also create like a difference with circadian cycles. Because in my case, in India, it's tropical. So 6 a.m. in India is like 12 a.m. in Europe. So this difference also affects circadian cycles. In first 2 weeks, I was very sleepy, and it took me a while to adjust my clocks, my biological clocks, and sleep.
Okay, so but I guess we are a very adjustable animal, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we look at humans from, and kind of a derail here, are humans? Does science classify humans as animals when we're studying neurological systems, or are we in our own category?
I would say if you take the evolutionary trajectory, human beings are like mammals. So I think they should be considered as like, I would say we are like glorified animals because we have like.
I agree with that. Glorified animals. That's a good one. Okay, so you're in Belgium, and how long are you in Belgium for before you move to Belgium?
Me to US, yeah, it's almost like 5 years.
5 years.
My PhD was 4 years and 10 months, yeah.
And do you mind sharing why the move? Why not stay in Belgium, like you said, the Harvard, right, of Belgium? Why move from such an amazing institution to the US?
So I thought I should get experience in different continents and different cultures, and also doing a PhD from Europe is great, but to get like broader expertise and to see like a different world, doing a PhD at a top schools in US is obviously good in CV. That's why I applied to Harvard, MIT, also to other places in the West Coast, and I got into MIT and also like other top school. So I picked MIT because obviously MIT is the best for science and engineering. So also I like the MIT culture of open science and open science policy and all those things that are very, very unique to MIT.
So help me understand, how does someone apply for an institution like MIT? How do you approach that? Do you go on the website and start looking at the requirements and send emails about like, what do I need to share? Or are there contacts that you came across maybe at your work in Belgium? Like, or did you have a friend or a colleague or a previous, academic collaborator that said, hey, I have some contacts here, I'd like to connect you, maybe look into this? How does that story come about?
So usually some people do have contacts, and they go to labs with the PI or somebody knows. But in my case, as I mentioned, maybe I came from a very humble background. I don't have like any background or any connections at the time. So I just applied randomly based on topic. At the time, I thought because my PhD was on neural networks, if I work on synapses, which are the building blocks of neural networks, I thought it would make a good connection. That's why I was applied to labs that works on synaptic transmission and synaptic plasticity. So I got into this amazing lab that works on fruit fly synapses at MIT, where I stayed for 20 years and published good papers.
So is this a position as a researcher?
It was a postdoctoral associate position,
Okay.
which was then promoted to research scientist.
Okay. Okay. Was the move to the US the kind of similar to Belgium, or were you able to move with your family?
Because I already adapted to Western culture and also to different climatic conditions.
Mhm.
My move from Europe and US was not that complicated.
Not
It
that
was very
complicated.
also Boston is like a kind of like a European city within US.
Yeah.
So that was quite easy. Then
Yeah.
moving from India to Belgium.
I've been to Boston. I've been to Harvard on like a tour, and I've been to MIT. I never went to those. I don't wanna leave that impression, but just went as a tour because I love academia and educational institutions. I was never good enough to get there myself, but I definitely enjoy those. Okay, so now you're in the U.S., right? So I think you've done the ultimate experiment on yourself, right? For moving from the different climates, different positions, and you've gone as far as possible from your homeland and your city, and your parents are like, when are you going to come back to us? What year are we looking at here? Because I'm trying to make a connection of where the technology is, because today we hear large language models, artificial intelligence, agentic AI. We hear neural networks, neural nets. These are like words that I'm starting to mute on all platforms because it feels like everyone's using them to get some attention and to get some engagement. But we're talking what years here?
So I got a PhD in November of 2015,
Mhm.
and I moved to Boston end of 15, and I started my postdoc from beginning of 2016.
Okay. Okay.
About
Now,
a decade.
now I know you, and the way that I found you, right, is from a page that is AI related. Obviously into your field, but AI related. When does AI is this a moment that AI comes, or is it before this that comes into Suresh's story? When does AI come into the story here?
It's actually my PhD. While working on this neural networks,
Mhm.
I'm writing my thesis where I saw like a word called perceptron. So perceptron is like a single neuron in a network. So we actually compared like a perceptron theory to one of the circuit I'm working on.
Right.
So at the time I thought at the time I thought it's just like a computational neuroscience thing. But from 2008 and 2018 and 19 time, there are so many labs at MIT, people talking about like neural networks and all this information. And from 2020 onwards, I came interested into this field. So we in fact, with an MIT undergrad, we did like a project using machine learning tools to look at synaptic activity. So from there onwards, I built on. I self-taught most neural networks myself because I have a background of understanding brain circuits, biological neural networks. So it's the logic of biological neural networks and artificial neural networks is same, but there are some differences.
Right.
So the architecture of this neural networks fascinated me, which made me to read like books and understand concepts involved in that. It requires some math. So I'm not a math guy, but I do learn some math in the process.
So help me understand, because I'm a huge fan of technology. I've been following technology since I was a child. I used to play video games, especially multiplayer video games like RuneScape and World of Warcraft, where I used to develop JavaScript to, macro, and they were very like labor intensive games where you had to click 100,000 times at the same place. I didn't want to do that because I was at school, right? I was in 7th grade, 8th grade. So I used to set these macros and these scripts to do, and I used to get banned all the time for doing that. You're not supposed to do that. But beyond that, all that I understood on what automation and macroing and robots and I guess artificial intelligence was just chatbots until I would say 2018ish, 2019ish.
19, yeah.
When I started getting into more heavily, and obviously that's when a lot of other people, and it became quite popular. but you're talking about 2015-ish, 2014-ish. What was the value of neural networks, and are large language models a thing yet at this time, or does that come after the fact?
People are working on this from all the deep learning things is not like very recent. Like if you go to like some of the godfather of AI, he's
Right,
been working in 60s and 50s.
right, 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 right,
Yeah, but we don't have like GPUs and data sets at the time to train.
right.
So it's like as technology progress, like in 2010 to 20 times, we had like more data
Yeah,
and more computation power. It's like more slow, right? So
right,
each year is an increment in like
right.
computation power. So because of increase in computation power and data sets, people are able to train large data sets with LLMs. And
Yeah,
that's why the field has boomed in. Like in 2014 and 15, as per at least in Europe, nobody was talking about like LLMs or the neural networks because at that time it was not very fancy or
right.
not famous.
Right, 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 right. I mean, just because I'm in Toronto, and the godfather of AI, George Hinton,
Yeah, yeah.
he's from here. So yeah, absolutely, you're absolutely right. It's been around forever, and I guess you're right. The compute wasn't there. You mentioned something interesting that I'd like to hear from you as an expert simplify for myself, but also the audience. Training, right? What if you can if you can maybe bring us from the how the human brain trains and learns to how we're now mimicking, or maybe not mimicking, but using that system to teach artificial intelligence. What does training mean exactly?
Training people use this word often, and they think training a biological neural network and an artificial neural network is same, but I think the principles are different. So in our brain or in any animal brain, the way how we learn is because of synaptic plasticity. So as you might know, when two neurons talk, they use synapses to communicate. By giving the same kind of stimulus, the synapses undergo like potentiation, which is called synaptic plasticity. In other words, if let's say you're preparing for an exam, right? You read your lesson one time, second time, and third time. So you're repeating your stimulus. So by repeating, you're making your connections like stronger. So it's in other words, biological learning is based on synaptic plasticity mostly, whereas training an artificial neural network is not synaptic plasticity based. It's based on like activation functions and how many input layers you have, how many hidden layers you have, and what's your activation function and other variables look like in a artificial neural network. But now people are trying with the Neurio AI advancement, people are trying to use synaptic plasticity kind of rules also, like in artificial neural networks, to train them using synaptic plasticity. For example, there are some attempts to use spike timing dependent plasticity. Otherwise, it's called STDP. So people are applying this kind of fancy neuroscience phenomenon to understand artificial neural networks, but we're very in the inception. So I would say training a biological system and an artificial networks are very different.
Yeah, and earlier in our chat, we were talking about your journey and when you made the decision to go into biological, especially animal neuroscience and understanding how a lot of the other, let's say, parents and friends, and just the overall circle, and maybe the cultural environment in India was about like computer science, right? Here's where computer science steps into your career, where I don't know if it was by choice, or I guess sometimes it's fate has this irony of bringing things full circle, and to me it's a really cool part of your story, that while you didn't want to go into computer science directly, it seems that computer science became part, because and this is my next question, is how much of your work is being done now with programming? Because I understand that you're using AI, right? But I'm assuming that that's via programming that you're implementing AI. And what exactly and how are you using AI for your field and for your expertise and for your studies? What exactly are you studying and how are you doing it?
So back both for programming and also for neural networks, my background it goes back to my PhD.
Mm-hmm.
So in my PhD, the lab where I worked, we use software. It's like a very fancy systems neuroscience lab. That means we have like people from computation background, engineering biologists like me.
Right.
So even to record like neural activity, we don't have any commercial softwares. So we have to open like MATLAB and we have to record with MATLAB. In my first day of PhD, I was terrified because being a biologist, I frankly speaking, I don't know what is a string is. So how to call a function, and the first month was like very humbling. So I asked my colleagues to help me with this code. So let's say I recorded like a neuron. Suddenly I would record. Sometimes the program crash with all the red errors. At the time, there's no ChatGPT to figure out, right? So I used to write down all the errors, and with each word and each keyword, I used to go back to books and Google search to understand what's going on. So with this very intimidating beginning, I learned some programming and some coding in my PhD. And then I went on using this computation, and then I moved from MATLAB to Python. But right now, I'm doing most of my coding with web coding. So I'm using like Cloud and other Copilot, GitHub Copilot to do all my coding. So right now, I am not that much like a coding person. I'm like a neuroscientist. My skills lies in like neuroscience. But with web coding, I'm building like biophysical models. It's like fascinating. So I'll tell you one more historic thing. So in the past, a few years back, one of my MIT students project was building like a neural model. It took 6 months. But right now, the same thing can be done like in 1 hour with web coding.
Wow. Okay, so and you mentioned that you're using these agentic coding systems like Claude, etc., and Copilot. You're using them to build models. What are you using these models for? What exactly is it being used for?
So I have some data from my MIT lab, which is unpublished. Okay. These are actual recordings. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to build like models to understand single neuron function and single neuron computations. Okay. And we have some data from normal neurons and some animals that have like mutation in a gene. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to understand what this mutation is doing to this neuron and how it affects its electric currents and synaptic potentials and all those things. So I'm modeling those data. I'm also doing some side projects of my own to look at like building like single neuron model, biophysical models, like conductance-based models.
Interesting. And are these agentic tools like, if you were to put, let's say, a percentage on how helpful they are with getting you results? This is a really tough question, I know, because how do you put a percentage to this? And let me just explain it. What I'm trying to understand is, how much do these agentic models understand what you're trying to do?
I would say with recent updates with Cloud, it's amazing. The web coding with Cloud is really, I really like it. Previously, I used to say, well, maybe it's not efficient to do coding with the chatbot because sometimes they write like a function which I don't like. So I had to go back and change and redo again, which takes time. But with cloud web coding, it's really like fascinating how it's
interesting
generating all the code.
But so you're using Claude Code specifically. You're not using the chat or the cowork. You're using the code itself. And okay, then let me ask you a question, which I know you're not into programming. But how much are these, like, are you aware of, I'm assuming you are, I'm sorry for asking this question, but just to make sure that for the audience as well and that we're on the same page, are you aware of the harnesses that these models have on them? Like, for example, Claude Code is made for coding, right? How close is that to the kind of logic that you would need for your models? Is it the same, or how does that work?
So here I have to say one more point. So the models I'm building are not super complex. They're simple models. Okay. So from my understanding, for simple models, Cloud is doing an excellent job. But if you want to build like multimodal models from different fields, still it's not perfect. So we need some human experts.
Right. And I'm sorry for acting like I know more than I'm sure you've thought of this.
But, no, you're good.
But there's this new thing that I've just started recently using, where I'm not sure if when you use your when you use a Claude, do you use Claude in the terminal or the IDE, like on the terminal?
I use it terminal.
Okay, you use it in the terminal. Okay. Yeah. But you use just the straight Claude, like you're not using any harnesses on it. Is that correct?
No, okay.
I'm going to share a harness that you might find useful, or maybe you can start thinking about maybe making your own harness. There's this one which is called Pi, and I'm not sure if you heard of Pi. Also another one called Oh My Pi, where they essentially, it's a harness to make things more efficient, right? Not as much usage. You can even add an advisor to it. So there's this one guy that I follow on X who's Roy, where he's made, well, he hasn't made it, but he's the one that introduced me to it, where he's made GPT 5.5, or I would say he uses Gemini. He uses Gemini to run whatever requests he has. And then he has an advisor on top of it, which is the GPT 5.5, to review whatever that first coding agent did. Now, Oh My Pi is made for coding and programming. That's what it's made specifically for. I'm wondering if maybe someone like yourself, or maybe you can speak to someone who's more into the software engineering side to help you with making the harness that's made for the models and whatever you need. I wonder how that would look like.
That'd be great. I like your advice. Yeah, I'll take that.
Look at me. I have this on video. That I'm able to talk to a research scientist and give some contribution. That's beautiful. All right. The next thing I want to go into is, did you see the recent news for Midjourney? Do you know the Midjourney story?
I heard about, but I'm not sure exactly. Maybe you can tell me.
Yeah. I wasn't really prepared for that. It didn't occur to me that this could be something that. But so they've essentially moved into the hardware. They were a design company, I would say, for software and coding and programming, but they moved into the hardware world, which is really cool, right? To make that jump. That's an amazing pivot because they're a pretty big company. They're not minor, and they went to a hardware. They're making a scanner which scanned the human body. Now, obviously, you haven't heard much about it, and it's not that I want to speak about Midjourney specifically, but what I'd like to speak to you about is, I think that the big talk right now, especially with coding agents and agentic AI, is that software is solved, which we can talk about that as well. I don't completely agree with that, but that's the sentiment, that software is solved. We should all move into hardware, right? We need to have more compute. We need to have more chips manufactured, in North America, in Europe, and everywhere, right? Instead of relying on a single source, and we should optimize the new hardware for AI so the AI can do more. My question, and it's not really a question, but I'd like to understand how you look at this. Do you think about this? Do you think about hardware that can help you with your research and your studies, or do we already have all the hardware that we need for neuroscience?
I would say it's never like ending, right? With advancements in technology, it's always like it's never perfect. So I would say right now we have GPUs. Maybe in 5 years we have like quantum computing. Maybe in next 10 years we may have a different computing. So it's always like a never-ending game. So I would say, and especially what with all these softwares and hardwares, neuroscientists need like more better tools to record neural activity and better tools to acquire using like fancy hardware and softwares. So I would say it's a never-ending game.
Okay.
So right now the challenge is, as you might know, in neuroscience, people can record. If you take like a small animal brains, like zebrafish or fly brain, you can image the whole brain. But if you want to image a whole mouse brain or a rat brain or a human brain, we don't have methodology. So we need like more better tools and better hardware and better software.
Right. And okay, here's another question I'd like to ask you from the perspective of an expert. So right now the current models are about, like, I think actually I'm gonna ask this question later. I want to understand how much do you understand tokens in terms of AI? Do you know much about tokens and token usage?
Because I used cloud tokens and
okay.
Yeah.
So if you were, and again, I know this is a silly question, but I think there's huge interest for this. If we were to equate a token with like a neuron, or
what ask the question. I was guessing that you compare tokens and neurons.
Yeah. How would so? I think okay. So many questions. I'm malfunctioning right now. My synapses are burning from all the questions I want to ask. But the question I want to ask is, would a token equal one neuron?
That's very difficult comparison because
it's a terrible comparison.
I would say maybe it's very difficult to compare because maybe I would say tokens are equal to like a synaptic vesicle because as you know, when synapses talk, they release like small packets of like chemicals, which will activate. Maybe I would say tokens as vesicles because you need like hundreds of vesicles to activate like a next layer of neurons.
Right.
So maybe some people might disagree. I would say tokens are like synaptic vesicles,
like
small, tiny, like balls which synapses use to talk to their neighbors.
Right. Because what I'm trying to understand is I want to see how close the AI models, the large language models, are to our intelligence. So, for example, right now I think that the top frontier models are around 5 terabytes in terms of parameters.
Yeah.
And again, this is a terrible question to ask an expert, because how do you? It's not apples and oranges. It's like apples and the moon, right? It's a complete different thing. But if you can try to tell me how close, or how not how close, but if let's say Claude Fable, right, the most powerful model, which I know right now is out of commission, but let's say Claude Fable, who is top of the top. By the way, personally, I have to disagree. I think GPT 5.5 is the best, but that's my personal opinion. But I think the general consensus is that Fable 5 is like the top.
I agree, yeah. Fable is the best.
Right. So if Fable is the best, Fable 5, or what the exact name is, if that's the best and it's at 5 terabytes parameters, what is the let's say Suresh's brain? Because you're not a regular person, right? You've got PhD, you got a lot of information, a lot of knowledge. What would Suresh's be in terms of if is there a way to? I just want to see how close are we to actual real human intelligence, not super intelligence, not general intelligence, but just human intelligence.
Yeah, right now people are. I have to say there's a lot of hype in this field with all the AGI and ASI and all these cool names.
Yeah.
But as of now, I work with small animals, right? My PhD is in fish and fruit flies.
Right.
So there are some tasks like those animals can do that we can't do. Let's say take a fish, it can swim perfectly. Mm. Take a fly, it can navigate in a complex environment with all the navigation clues.
Right.
So if you compare like Fable and even with these animals, yeah, it's very comparison like apples to oranges, because they're meant to do like a particular behavior.
Right.
For example, flies are meant to fly and to sense fruits and do those kind of navigatory tasks, whereas fish is meant to do like swimming. In the same way, if you're asking me to compare like Fable to human brain, or the animal brain, I think it's a comparison like apples to oranges.
Okay, that's a perfect answer.
And, yeah.
Sorry.
Also, as you know, I'm sure you might know more than me. A major issue with all these chatbots is the hallucinations.
Okay.
So they hallucinate, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a real brain, like if you take any expert or a human being, when we write, we don't hallucinate like a normal person.
Right.
So still, it's an unfair comparison. I would say human brain is the best computation device in the universe than any chatbots or any things yet to come.
Okay, so 2 questions that I really want to kind of get before I lose my chance, because you just gave me some very good. By the way, thank you for that answer. That's a very mature and scientific answer, which is the kind of answers that I like. I don't like all these hype where like AI is already above us, they're just smarter than us, because that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about some very specific and specialized tasks, right? Like a fly can do some tasks that we can't, right? That doesn't mean that the fly is smarter than us. But just because we can do math in our head doesn't mean that we're smarter. And then we got to talk about definitions, and it gets into a whole. But I like your answer. So I kind of want to continue that conversation to ASI and AGI. These are very buzzwordy, capture attention, and people are like, oh, what is that? Can I have a scientist? And I think you've earned that title obviously with your work. Can I have a scientist and a neurological scientist? Like, what do you think about those terms? Do you think that, like, are those real terms? And how would you explain that to someone who's never heard these terms before?
Well, like in every science, concepts change, right? So today we are defining something as AGI and ASI. So let's say today is the 21st June, 2026. If you meet again like in next year at this time, concepts will change. There might be some changes, right? So these are very terms that some people use, but they're very confusing. So artificial general intelligence and artificial super intelligence. So I understand it's a step-by-step increment, but maybe things will change. For now, maybe you might know recently I posted something about ASI and AGI paper from Google DeepMind.
Yeah.
If you read the paper, they precisely mention about that.
Okay. I haven't looked at that one, but I'm gonna go look at it. And there was one more before I forget. Yikes, what was it? AGISI. Um, Darn it, I lost it.
Wait, take your time.
Yeah, I had one. The ASI and AGI was one of the questions, and when you were kind of explaining. Oh yes. So you mentioned hallucinations, right? How large language models are very prone to hallucination, and we have to work towards it. And I think they've gotten really great at that. In the last 6 months, where the hallucinations have been reduced greatly. So this is a bit of a derail again from our conversation, but to me it's really important. Why is it that sometimes us as humans or even animals, I'm sure they have this, especially like dogs. I've noticed this in dogs, as I'm a huge dog person and dog lover. But in humans, there are these moments where we have these revelations of. I'm not talking about like illumination, but um, like certain things in the house that I've been living in for years. I never really notice. They're just sort of there. And then one day I look at it, I'm like, has this thing been here the whole time? And it seems like it's a new thing. And I asked my fiance, hey, was this here the whole time? Was this chip on the wall? It's like, yeah, it's been there forever. Um, what is that? Because to me, it feels like it's an hallucination. Like, oh, I thought I never saw this, but now I saw this. From a scientific perspective, what is that? How does that happen?
That's a very complex question, and I have to say that I really don't know, because it involves like so many brain regions and
Right.
so many senses and so many stimuli. So
Right.
it's very hard to define. And moreover, I'm not a cognitive neuroscientist.
Hmm.
I'm a synaptic and neurophysiologist working on understanding brain from computations and from neural networks.
Okay.
That's a psychologist and
Okay.
a cognitive scientist.
I thought I'd try. But thank you for that. Next is I'd like to talk to you a little bit about because obviously you are into AI and you like AI. Obviously, there's different models that focus on different items and have different types of success, right? Like Claude Code is huge Claude is huge into coding, programming, and especially the enterprise world. GPT is good for coding, but it's good for other things as well: image, video, etc., research. Then you have Google DeepMind, who's obviously they've got all the coding and imaging visualizations, but they're also really big on the AlphaFold items and stuff like that. Where do you see, and this is I guess the question of the times, but where do you see the models going towards? And obviously I know you're biased because of your field of expertise, but do you see them going more into the programming, more into the enterprise world, or do you see them going towards more into the biological medical world?
So right now, as you might know, all these major companies, they're investing like in BioAI space and in biology, which is fascinating. So from my understanding is that, as you mentioned about AlphaFold, so AlphaFold, as you know, solved like at least they claim they solved like a 50 years old problem of protein folding.
Right.
So now, because we know they also solved like RNA structures and other structures. So the next challenge is to put all these molecules together and to function as a virtual cell. So how all these 20,000 proteins, all this genome functions as a system. I think from understanding of reading papers and listening to podcasts from this BioAI experts, I thought the field is going to understanding cells and tissues at systems level by integrating all data sets we have, like from genomics, proteomics, and all fancy sexual biology and microscopic data sets. I think the field is moving into like integrating all these data sets and putting like virtual cells and virtual tissues, and with an aim to study human biology by reducing use of animal models. So right now in labs, people use like rats, mice, fruit flies, fishes, right? So the plan is to reduce use of animals and to understand like human biology with these models. There's some pros and cons. So it's my main concern was all these models are today on data sets that are published.
Yeah.
So sometimes data sets from one lab may have some differences with other lab.
Right.
So if your input is bad, obviously your output is going to be like bad. So maybe, and now all these major companies might have to work on that to generate their own data, which is like high quality and more reliable, and then trying good data into these models to get good outcomes. Otherwise, it's again like garbage in, garbage out is going to be the approach. If not.
Thank you for that. That's something that I need to take away and look more into, especially for my investing choices, but no investing or financial advice. My next question, which this one I've been thinking about a lot, and I think you'd be quite a good candidate to give me some insight and answer on this. But what do you think of these tools and hardware into the brain, like Neuralink? Do you see that as the future?
Like brain computers interface.
Yeah. What do you think about those?
That's it's again like a very important problem. There's some advancements in the field. Yeah, that's people. Though I'm not that field that much, I do read a few papers. I think that's a feature. So people are trying to integrate silicon circuits with biological circuits to integrate both artificial world with biological worlds and to have some advancements in therapies. I think it's an amazing field to treat some diseases like ALS,
Right.
which is like so I think recently there's a tweet from Elon Musk or somebody that they found like a way using these chips to at least make the person with ALS to move. I think
Right.
there's some excitement also into that area of neuroscience.
Do you see value in maybe inserting a technology like hardware technology like Neuralink into animals?
People are doing that. So, for example, it's been, you might know, there's a field of neuroscience called navigation. So, where, let's say you're trying to go to like a big city like New York,
Yeah.
and you want to find like Times Square.
Right.
So you took a train and you get into stop, and then you're figuring out your way.
Right.
So the same way people create some kind of like virtual things in the lab, and they put some electrodes or some implants into animal brain, and they look at like how animals navigate, and they look at like firing patterns.
Wow.
So this has already been there from like 2 or 3 decades, and people even won like Nobel Prize. There's a scientist couple from Norway and from UK. They got Nobel Prize for understanding navigation. So this has been there for a couple of decades at least.
Is it and forgive my ignorance, but are these tools something that we can use to control the animals and communicate with them?
Yeah, we can control the animal brain using some cool techniques like optogenetics, where you put like a tiny channel or a pore into animal brain, into some specialized cells or some special brain circuitry, and you can make the brain like it's like mind controlling tool for neuroscientists.
Wow. Okay, I need to look into that. That's amazing. Okay, so final question, because I know we've gone quite some time, and I thank you for your time. But one question I'd like to ask is, if Suresh is in first year university right now in 2026, right, and he's living in in North America, in Europe, right, in Asia, and obviously it depends, but I'd like to hear what would Suresh get into right now? Would you still pursue biological field, or is there something else that you would advise Suresh to get into?
So right now, with all the AI excitement, I would choose like a scientific question that has both AI and bio component, like I'm doing right now. So I'm using like biophysical models and computation, also like neuroscience, right? So the same flavor of science. I'll choose like a project that has computation, AI, and neuroscience.
That's amazing. You would choose exactly what you're doing right now, and that to me is a testament to you listening to your instinct, 20 something years ago. And I think that's something that I think a lot of these students, and even for myself, is something that they need to listen into. It doesn't matter what the hype thing is. Yes, it might be good now, but maybe in 5 years, there's going to be a new thing. But as long as you're following your passion and what you're good at, and something that you can contribute, everything else you can connect later on, like your story. Suresh, I want to thank you so much for your time. This has been very enlightening, and I definitely have some homework to take away, and maybe in the future we'll see you again. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much too. Those are very great questions. I enjoyed.